MEST has always been the secretariat of this BDCG with the support of the various member organizations, and we have organized 14 regional BDS trainings as well as conferences that have an investment of market development and value chain development within East Africa. Therefore, we appreciate the BDCG group and the traction that it has been gaining with many organizations supporting the BDS practice. We therefore welcome you to today's meeting, and we are looking forward to the upcoming BDS conference in terms of planning and conference, which begins really today after today's webinar. So this pre-conference really is towards that event. I call on your support towards the mandate of the BDCG network to enhance the economic growth of our region, because we are looking at the BDS conference really being moved beyond Kenya. We have a big role in facilitating the diversification and the expansion of the development work through systemic and related growth in innovations. Thank you to each one of you that is in attendance. Thank you for our panelists. Feel free and feel welcome to engage with us today, and I trust we'll have a fruitful meeting. Thank you. Karibuni sana. I now invite the chair, Winnie Milo, to take up from here. Thank you.
Over to you, Madam Chair.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much, Margaret and team. Really happy to be in this space today, this morning. I really would like to recognize the time that you have spared to attend this webinar, and I want to tell you that you will not be disappointed. Just picking up from what Doreen said, the BDCG is one of the knowledge networks that we have set for ourselves. A number of organizations have come together, set it up, and we embark on a number of activities which we are really happy to have more of the other organizations who are on the same page in terms of what we do to join us. Some of our key activities I thought I would just outline this morning before we get to the webinar itself, so that as you listen in, you'll also be encouraged to probably also become a member. We are an organization where we support each other with joint planning for all the network related activities, some of which are around engagement in a lot of discussions around market systems, value chain facilitation type of things. This is also to avoid the kind of duplication we see around nowadays for donor funded projects. And for that reason, really try to maximize and leverage on each other. We also share opportunities and lessons learned from all the programming that we do as organizations. We also serve as a forum for training and capacity development for new entrants, something that we do in each of our annual conferences, where we have 3 days of training of topical issues. The last ones have been around building capacity on making markets work for the poor, M4P approaches. We've also had trainings around cooperative management, around youth development, and such like topics. So really welcoming organizations who have new staff, or even organizations taking on new pieces of work around these areas. It's something we do, and we're just going to share what the one for this year will be all about. In the last 14 years, we've facilitated a lot of these trainings, and through these conferences, we've had dialogues and increasingly having more entrants like the government. Like the last one, we had quite a number of county representatives from Kenya, but also we've also had a lot of inroads into expanding within the region. The last one, we had a lot of participation from neighboring countries like Ethiopia, Burundi, Zimbabwe, Malawi, quite a number, meaning that as a network, it's really growing, and we really like the followership, meaning that we are becoming more and more relevant. The training, just to give you a bit of what we intend to do, this conference, this webinar today is preparation or a pre-conference for the upcoming one, which is going to be in November. We've already set the date. It's slated for the week of 21st to 27th of November. And for this year, we're going to focus on climate change mitigation and adaptation approaches. We again going to deepen our understanding, thinking, and discussions on today's topic, which is agri-food circularity. We're also going to look at the opportunities that arise from waste management and especially commercializing food waste and waste within agriculture. We're also going to have dialogue around policy formulation and how we can ensure that the policy is really informed by practice and that there are also adequately a number of people who are working towards advocacy, because this is also an area where we see a huge gap. So with those few remarks, I would like to welcome everyone and really looking forward for the topic for today. We have lined up a number of panel experts who are going to lead us in this discussion, after which we're going to talk a little bit about the conference at the end of the webinar. So I would like to say welcome everybody. Feel free to interact with the chat box. If you have ideas, you're welcome to write them in there. You're also welcome to ask questions, but the moderator for today is going to brief us on the model of interacting in the conference. After the conference, we shall be circulating a survey about this webinar. Please take time. It's not going to take you more than 2 minutes to fill it in. We really request for your feedback so then future conferences can be improved. Thank you very much, and over to you, Margaret. I did not introduce myself. My name is Winnie Mailu. I am the chair of the BDCG, and I work for an organization called Christian Aid. I am the Markets and Livelihood Advisor at Christian Aid. Thank you. Over to you, Margaret.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and we greatly appreciate your opening remarks on this. As directed by the Chair, kindly indicate the organization from the chat. Let us engage, let's network as we engage on this webinar today. You can indicate on the chat box what organization you're representing. And at this point, I will hand over to our moderator for the day, David Chebriot. Over to you. Thank you. Over to you, David. You're still mute.
All right. Thanks, Margaret. Welcome everyone present to this important panel discussion on agri-food circularity, a framework for thinking, and I think more importantly for acting. As I am David Cheboriot, the East Africa Manager for E4 Impact Foundation, and I will be your moderator on this panel discussion. The outcome that we expect to see from this discussion and this exciting panel is first to unpack the whole concept around agri-food circularity. I think this is an emerging and yet very important sector in our ecosystem. Secondly, we want to gain insights from practitioners who are here, who are the panelists, and who are deeply engaged in this sector. And then three, we want to share the opportunities therein and create a framework for further engagement with all the various stakeholders that are involved. To meet our outcomes, I'm honored to introduce to you the panelists of the day. And I will start with Mr. Charles Opio, who is the Influencing and Advocacy Manager at GAIN. Charles is a food system specialist, currently working for GAIN as an Influencing and Advocacy Manager in Kenya. He's playing an advisory role in all matters relating to food systems and leading the UN Food System Plans and Nutrition for Growth activities on behalf of GAIN in Kenya. He's also the leader of the network of close to 150 SMEs under the umbrella of Sun Movement. He is the national coordinator for Sun Business Network. He holds a BSc in Public Health from Kenyatta University, a Master of Public Health from Maseno, and a Diploma in Development Effectiveness from Denmark. Welcome, Charles. Our second panelist is Honorable Wanjala Makanda, who is the current County Executive Committee member for Agriculture, Livestock, Fisheries, Irrigation, and Cooperatives for Bungoma County. Before Mr. Makanda joined the county government in 2017, he worked in the development sector as a regional value chain development specialist with special focus on supporting the development and implementation of regional agricultural value chains in dairy, livestock, horticulture, apparels, leather, cereals, and so on. He really comes with a lot of experience. Welcome, Mr. Makanda. The third panelist is Peter Biemaro, who is the impact manager at Bob Inc. And Peter's roles is on leading the implementation of all-farms projects in Kenya, promoting and scaling circular and micro, small and medium agri enterprises through providing tailored business development advisory, supporting capital raise and management of engagement with local enterprise support. Welcome, Peter. And our third panelist is Madam Jane Maina, who is the MD for VAT Limited. And VAT Limited specializes in export of fresh vegetables and processed fruits products, targeting the European markets and regional markets. Jane has over 20 years experience in horticultural industry. Our role is to ensure that the business is focused on achieving its strategic objectives. And the VAT, which is a social enterprise, depends 100% on the produce sourced from smallholder farmers. And despite social cultural norm, Jane ensures that VAT consciously strives to engage women. And before being the MD of VAT, Jane worked with the UN in social and resource mobilization for primary healthcare projects in Southern Sudan. Welcome, Jane. So to ensure that we really get the maximum value for this panel discussion and to make it very interactive, I would like to encourage all of us as audience and everyone following, whether on Facebook Live or on Zoom Live, to continue using the chat function and introduce themselves and post any comments or reactions that you might have, or any information that you would like to share about your organization. And secondly, to use the Q&A function to direct any questions to the panelist. When you're doing that, type the question and indicate who among the panelists you're directing it to. So let's begin, and to really open the floor, I would like to invite Peter from Bob Inc. To really help us unpack what is agri-food circularity and why is it relevant to us right now as a country. Welcome, Peter.
Thank you, David, and ladies and gentlemen, good morning. As requested, I prepared a few slides to be able to share with you what agri-food circularity is all about. And let me see if I can be able to get the slides shown. Okay, it's not working. Maybe just to start us off quickly is, agri-food circularity basically is a concept, at least to our understanding, is a concept that applies, principles of circular economy, such as recycling and reuse, to the entire food system. And it applies it from production, processing, all through to consumption. And agri-food circularity basically seeks to design out waste, pollution, and keep materials and products in use for longer by closing the loop. And here we mean, wastes and losses that come out from the production system become feedstock for another cycle. Agri-food circularity seeks to also create value from various waste streams and making the most of food, whereby we're converting food losses, both avoidable and unavoidable food losses, as well as food waste and byproducts from processing into new products. By design, it looks at regeneration, and it regenerates living systems such as soils and provides renewable resources, enhances the environment, and supports biodiversity. As David said, agri-food circularity is something new for us as a concept, and we're trying to see how we can encourage the ecosystem really to adopt some of these practices because it contributes to our sustainability. And there are various pathways to agri-food systems that we would like to share with you today. And those are basically borrowing in from the Moorman's ladder. So the Moorman's ladder basically gives a hierarchy around which how food losses and byproducts can be utilized to create value. And by rule of thumb, the higher up the continuum, the higher the value of products that come out from the system. So we're looking at food systems where, you know, we're making new food products out of food losses and byproducts. We'll look at making uses of food losses, food waste, and byproducts as an input into agricultural production. Here we're seeing opportunities, for example, making compost formulations. But lastly, we're also looking at leveraging food losses and byproducts as a source of bioenergy, because we believe utilizing this kind of resources creates a renewable energy source that can be used to fuel future economies. And just applying agricultural circularity to the entire food sector, we're borrowing from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, where we're looking at a system where people can be able to source, especially from the cities where we see a lot of urbanization. So sourcing of food grown regeneratively and locally where appropriate. We're looking at designing and marketing healthy food products, but also making the most of food where byproducts are used as ingredients and resources into the bioeconomy. So the Ellen MacArthur Foundation is really one of those think tanks around globally recognized, promoting circular economy, and they also believe how circular economy can be applied into the food sector. And agri-food circularity basically is it's kind of the opposite of the linear modern food production system that looks at, you know, waste generation, a lot of pollution, and creating a lot of harm to the natural systems. So agri-food circularity is one of those, like I mentioned before, promotes a lot of sustainability initiatives that will enable regeneration and also minimizing wastage and loss of food. The second part of this, which is quite interesting for us, is why should we transition to agri-food systems? And we see that it's important for us to transition to these systems because it promotes economic growth and development. It will create value, will enhance skills, and also create jobs. Agri-food circularity as a concept and as a system allows for efficient and economical use of resources with an ultimate positive outcome because of the environment. And examples here are, for example, looking at efficient energy use and water usage. We're looking at efficient agro-processing. We're looking at reduced consumer wastage and improved waste management. And at the end of it all, we believe agri-food systems or agri-food circularity systems can be able to enable countries like Kenya, the continent itself, to feed a growing population, because we believe it's important with the numbers going up. For example, we estimate about 10 billion people globally by 2050. Right now in Kenya, we're seeing a population of about 54 million with a percentage growth of about 2.6% per annum. So we believe initiatives like this will enable food to be availed and not lost, and be able to consume for the consumers that we're trying to target. So David, thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Peter, for laying the ground and really making us understand what is agri-food circularity, that is not linear, but is circular, and its relevance. But I think to really go deeper in understanding the relevance, it would be good to really understand about the opportunities within the agri-circular economy by way of examples, because I think it's only through examples that we really get to appreciate much more about this agri-food circularity. And I think for this way of sharing examples, I'm going to invite all the panelists actually to share their take about some relevant examples they see on the opportunities for agri-food circularity. So I'm going to begin with the CC for Bungoma, Honorable Makanda, and then I will go to Opio, Mrs. Maina, and then back to you, Peter. So CC, Karibu, at least share with us a bit of what you see as opportunities in this topic.
Okay, okay, David, thank you for this opportunity. As you have said, my name is Matthew Swanjala Makanda. I'm the County Executive Committee Member for Agriculture, Livestock, Fisheries, Bungoma County. And as you all understand, agriculture is about 90% devolved to counties. And I think that's why I'm here, perhaps again on behalf of my colleagues who are basically the policymakers at the county level as far as agriculture production is concerned. I'm happy that Peter, I think, has already gone ahead to define and basically expound on the concept of agri, basically, giving a deep understanding and a definition, which I agree with him that this is an emerging field. It's not, it has not been with us, but also I understand that it's significantly important as population increase, as well as locally, we need as developments in which we are going to ensure that food is available and is produced as efficient as possible. So my understanding, David and the team, is that basically sustainable production of food in a way that reduces as much waste as possible, and also in a way that doesn't disrupt the environment in terms of leading to climate change. So I know some of the examples have already been given by my colleague, but I just want to look at the entire production value chain in terms of food production, and perhaps give some of the examples and opportunities that I think or we think this happens. Number one is around crop production. Because of the definition focuses mainly on how we can be able to even recycle some of the resources that we have. So in terms of crop production, we have issues around ensuring that we use some of what we think are either crop waste or food waste into the production system, so that we can be able to recycle some of the nutrients into the soil. And we have several examples, including green manure, farmyard manure, compost manure, as well as liquid manure, which are used for crop production in the farms. The second example is around which is used in livestock production systems. Some of the crop waste and some of the other wastes are used in food production. I mean, they are used in animal processing, as well as in production of animal feeds and even fish feeds, as well as production of organic manure. The third one is around industrial processing, where we have production of animal feed, again, from things like maize bran, and as well as wheat bran and fish meal. And I just want to mention again that circular economy, the agri-food circular economy basically also involves production of food in a balanced way, so that we try to minimize food waste as much as possible, as well as enabling the balanced consumption within communities. In my view, those are some of the examples I can give for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, CC. I think very insightful, your points on the opportunities. I think we can add more to these opportunities. Charles, you can share what you see as opportunities. Yeah, I think it's insightful. We are stimulating the discussion and sharing more on this issue. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much, David. And as you've heard, I'm Charles Opio. I work for GAIN, based here in Nairobi. And as you've heard, this is a very timely topic in terms of just trying to have a paradigm shift in a way in which how food systems are really managed or run. Ideally, as you've mentioned very clearly, circular kind of food systems demands that we have to shift from just the way we produce, consume, and think about food to a more sustainable way in way we do. So specifically, I would say that part of what we need to do, or what could be an opportunity, is to kind of work with communities, just especially consumers, to demand what I would call foods which are sustainably produced, to be able to strengthen local value chains, improving nutrition as a major issue, and therefore, even as we think holistically about in terms of food security issues, but then also look at how much we'd be able to really harness as much nutrition as possible. And that means that now communities must really be at the center of this particular discussion. The other thing I would want to mention is about diversification in terms of crops and livestock and the kind of production that we are making with our agricultural food systems, so that at least we are able to really ensure that issues around recycling, reuse is really completed. And that would also mean that we are also able to achieve the optimal nutrition that we are looking for, because if we don't diversify our production, then now we realize that we're not able to really meet the demand as it were at the moment. And therefore, I really call upon all of us to look at it that communities be at the center of it, demanding what is sustainably produced, and to ensure that our local value chains are really sustainably managed. And at the same time, diversification in terms of what is being produced is going to be very key even in the coming years, because we are looking at even the current malnutrition rates, the deficits in terms of our staple foods at the moment. It means that really we have to go ensure we make most and optimally use the available resources to ensure that we reduce as much loss as possible, but also maximize their outcomes, both in terms of food security, but also nutrition security. So in brief, that's what I would want to say.
Brilliant. Yeah. Quite clear and in order, really. Recycle, reuse, optimize resources. I think we can now hear from Jane, who is a practitioner, right, in the field, speaking from VAT experience and so on. So Jane, what do you see as, did we miss Jane? Okay, maybe we're missing Jane, but I'm sure she will reconnect. So we're coming back to you, Peter. I think you're sort of an investor and in the sector, supporting its development. So Bobbing has really invested. So what are the opportunities for the enterprises that you've invested in? What are some of the examples? Yeah.
Very nice observation, David. So basically, as Bob Inc., we've done quite a lot of work in terms of understanding the landscape of circular agribusiness and circular economies, and also looking at circular agri-food systems in Kenya. We've looked at about 25 commodities where we see opportunities for circular systems being deployed. And for us, we see, across board opportunities coming in all the way from transforming food for consumption, for human consumption. So a classic example is in the dairy industry, where we have come across a couple of companies that are really trying to be innovative. A classic example is Happy Cow and Eldoville Limited, based in Nakuru and in Nairobi. So Happy Cow, for example, is a company that is dealing in processing of cheese. And one of the byproducts coming out from cheese is whey. So previously, Happy Cow used to give whey for free to farmers, and yet it's a highly nutritive product, a byproduct from processing of cheese. And with support from GAIN, they were able to, fortify the whey product and come up with a nutritious yogurt called Yogis. So Yogis is being sold to the low-income market segments around the tier 3 supermarkets in the neighborhoods of Nairobi and also in the rural areas. And we see this transition really making sense in terms of previously providing this product for free, yet it's highly nutritive, and basically valorizing that into a yogurt that is really highly nutritious for human consumption. Another classic example that we're seeing is regards to cereals. So there are a lot of losses coming out from cereals. Right now, we're seeing a registration of about between 10 and 25% losses in cereals. And some companies are being innovative in terms of utilizing some of these losses. A classic example is Safi Organics. They're based in Mwea, and they're utilizing rice husks, for example, to formulate fertilizers. So they're making biochar from the rice husks, adding value to this through ingredients like a black soldier fly, the manure coming out from the black soldier fly production, and really producing a highly potent fertilizer, organic fertilizer, that is being used commercially across various enterprises like tomatoes, coffee, and in the flour sector. And we see Safi Organics really taking the steps in terms of utilizing this initiative and trying to reduce the losses that are quite a problem in the Mwea County area, and making value from this, which is previously a product that was being burnt and being left in the fields to degrade. Another one that we're seeing in terms of sectors is the foods and horticulture sector, where again in this we're seeing a lot of losses being registered to a tune of about 30 to 40% in terms of losses. And some companies are also trying to innovate in terms of how they come in to manage this. So a good example here would be the Kenya Papaya Products Limited. They're based in Juja. And what they're doing is, through utilizing pawpaw as a key ingredient, they're making jam from pawpaw. And as a result of processing this, there are some byproducts that come out of the jam processing. For example, the peels, the seeds. And Kenya Papaya Limited is really trying to see how best, as opposed to discarding these products, to create new products that can be either consumed by humans or be able to be fed into the livestock industry. So right now they're making the papaya seed cake, which is a livestock deworming product alongside with the animal feeds from the seed, which is quite an innovation. And they also utilizing some of the seed oil to extract oil for cosmetic manufacturing. And the papaya leaves, which is quite interesting, is making a tea from the leaves. I'm not sure if any of us has taken papaya leaf tea, but this company is trying to really push the envelope to get tea from papaya leaves, as opposed to just discarding this as a valueless product. They're making tea from this and putting it on the shelves. And some of the high-end supermarkets really are putting this product on the shelf for consumers like us to get nutritious tea that is, according to their experience, it's a tea that helps, alleviate, for example, things to do with the prostate and cervical cancer treatment. So we recommend some of us who, are more health cautious to try out the papaya tea. So I'd like to stop there and just have the rest also give a couple of examples. Thank you, David.
Sure. Very good, Peter. And I can tell you that I've tasted the papaya tea. As in, it's really great. Yeah. And it's also great and emerging that some of the BDCG members here are actually supporting or investing in that sector, because Kenya Papaya, Safi Organics are some of the companies that even have passed through our accelerator program as if for impact. So it's great and very relevant examples for sure. I think, Jane, we're coming back to you. We were getting the practitioner's view on those opportunities that are really emerging from this sort of new but already been adopted topic on agri-food circularity. So we would like to hear from your experience as VAT. Yeah.
Thank you, David. My name is Jane Minor, the Managing Director of VAT. And I think circularity is not per se a new concept, because if we break it down to what are those things that we do to add value, to recoup more value from practices that we are already doing. Here at VAT, we are in export of fresh vegetables and fruits, but we are also in processing of fruit products, that is fruit pulp, mainly mango and passion fruit pulp. And we also do mango drying. All our processes involve the fresh, farm produce. So we try to practice the idea of recouping utmost value right from the field. At the field level, we work with the smallholder farmers mainly. What we do is that we try to encourage our farmers to, as much as possible, use whatever is generated, whatever waste is generated from our production processes. For example, when we are talking about mangoes and there's a period for pruning. In pruning, we have bits of wood coming from the branches that we are pruning off, but we also have the leaves from the mango trees. Can we make compost out of the leaves? Can we as VAT buy the wood that is coming from the branches to be able to use it in our processing unit? And when we bring it back to our processing unit, be it the vegetables or the fruits themselves, when we are packaging the vegetables for export, we cut bits and pits, we grade out some of the produce that is not to the specifications of the export specs that are demanded by our customers. But what do we do with those bits and pieces that we are cutting from the beans? We then have within the locality of our factory, farmers who are keeping livestock. Then we give these products, they buy it at a subsidized fee, and they make feeds for their cattle. When we are doing the mangoes, we have the byproduct of the seeds and the peelings. These ones we take back to a farm, have them dried. This is at the very basic level before we can install anything that is begin to think of it from a complex perspective. What other products can we get? As a basic, as we develop those other processes, we can bring back these seeds, dry them, then come and supplement the fuel that we are using again to fire our boilers. What are the complementary activities within our production that can even make use of what is not fully utilized on one line and be used on the next line? For example, when we are drying the mangoes, we slice off the mangoes. We are not, because that is a very manual process, we are not able to recoup to remove all the flesh from the mango seed. So what we do is then again feed the mango seeds into our pulping line, and the pulping line is able to clean the seeds by removing or extracting all the pulp or all the flesh in and making it into the pulp. And then those are the seeds we pick and go dry and bring back for firing the boilers. In terms of long-term plans and what else can be done with those seeds, we know now that, for example, the mango seed can produce a mango flour, which is a highly nutritious product. As we heard from Charles, what are the products that we can think of that would not only give us extra revenue, but also be able to help us address the issues of household food security and nutrition. So it's more or less, in short, it's actually breaking it down and simplifying it into what are those processes that we can do to get more value, to speak to sustainability in our processing processes as well as our production processes.
No,
Thank
very
you.
good. Great, brilliant, Jen. As in, I wonder whether you allow people to come and visit your factory. It's it's so inspiring what you're saying, and it seems very real.
Yes, they are welcome, of course, with some prior arrangements, acknowledging that we are a food processing unit, but with arrangements we can welcome.
Great. No, wonderful. Yes, great. All right, let's moving on with the discussion. So we are really seeing clear opportunities that really exist within the agri-food and agri-circularity system. But the other question, of course, that is emerging is that within Africa and the world at large, presently there is a ticking time bomb in relation to sustaining these food systems, because there is a lot of subdivision of the land and converting of agricultural land into real estate. And therefore, there is always underproduction as parcels of land are getting smaller and smaller and productivity is really declining due to intensification or post-harvest losses. I want to ask Charles, because I know Gain has really done a lot of work here. What is the recourse and how can we build a positive momentum going forward, just to be able to manage some of these emerging challenges?
Yeah, I think, David, and I just wanted to just put a few things into perspective, and I love what Peter mentioned earlier, that looking at even the population growth rate today, it means that we really have to be very deliberate. currently within our food systems, there are three major things that we really have to look into. Is exponential growth rate that are currently being experienced globally and even at national level. We know very well that we are at about 7.6 billion, likely to be 10 billion by 2050. Kenya, we are about 49 million. We are likely to hit 64 million by 2030, actually. Yeah, so it means that really looking into that. At the same time, the issues around global warming, which is a major issue in terms of the climate change, really poses a further challenge into this. I don't want to mention COVID-19 because basically all this compounds the whole issue in terms of, are we able to meet the needs of the population? And therefore, we are saying that there is a big time bomb, as you've mentioned very well, that if we are going to continue subdividing land, degrade most of our arable lands, then I'm telling you, it's really going to be a major challenge globally in terms of meeting the food security issues for all the populations. In fact, it's stated that likely that 70% of even arable land globally has already been degraded. These are statistics that actually been established, and that means that the situation is very dire. And it would mean then we have to really take measures to really ensure that we can be able to meet the food deficit and the challenges that we are facing today. As we speak, we know very well Kenya, we are facing between 20 to 30% deficit in terms of our staple food. At the same time, you know very well, we are also facing what we call the triple burden of malnutrition. I speak also from a nutrition perspective, because I believe that food is supposed to nourish and to ensure that we have both human health, but also the health of the planet. And therefore, I would really say that with that kind of deficit, close to about 10 million Kenyans already facing hunger, it means that really there's a challenge. And with a growth rate of 2.6%, that in the next 10 years, we really are facing a big issue. So some of the things that we really need to look into, I would say that we have to look at our land laws. And I think Kenya, that is an area that has really we've not done very well. We have to ensure that our land law in terms of our tenure systems needs to be addressed, so that we have to look at even the zoning laws in terms of, can we have areas that have been established to be bread baskets, or with lands that are really would be considered to be where we generate a lot of our food, protected at all cost. And that means then that has to be encompassed or encapsulated within a legal framework or within the laws, to ensure that we do not subdivide further and transform our land, which is supposed to be used for food production, into real estate development. I know there's a whole argument in terms of the cost benefit analysis in terms of farming land and looking at how much money somebody can recoup. Perhaps even, like, for instance, we talk about Kiambu County. A lot of proponents who have really sold off most of the land will tell you they will get more money in terms of selling off the land, putting up apartments and all that. But at the end of the day, we are saying we have a population to protect, we have a future to look into, and therefore we really have to really put laws in place to look at our land tenure systems, look at how we protect at all costs the very arable land that we have. Digitization, in fact, the role of technology is very key in terms of how we manage our land data and our land systems in this particular country. I know that is something that has already started off, but I believe that we need to do a lot of effort to ensure that there's a bit more of proper management on how we do our things. The other thing I wanted to say is investing in early warning systems, deploying what I would call the latest technologies, including aerial solutions. And that means we have to go further and even look at what we call the geospatial kind of technologies that will enhance our ability to effectively plan for our lands and the way we produce our food. So all these are issues that I think are already being canvassed, but I think we really have to move with speed, because as I've mentioned, the population growth rate at the moment, we can't even meet. And therefore, even the cost of food is likely to double in the next 2 decades. And that, to me, I believe is something that really needs to be addressed, that we have to look at the geospatial planning around our land systems, looking at our laws, basically trying to ensure that we work with our communities to understand the need to protect our food basket regions at all costs, to ensure that we can deliver. Because as I've said, we really must be able to do as much as we can to address that. And that's what GAIN actually with our partners and most of the advocacy work that we do, we try as much as possible to really bring some of these conversations to the table. As we speak, we know very well there's the upcoming UN Food System Summit that will be taking place in New York in September. And we've had a series of dialogues within the regional economic blocks in Kenya to put a few things into perspective. And one of the things that came out so strongly from the Central Region Economic Bloc, with the 10 counties put together, they will tell you there's a great concern in terms of how much land which is supposed to be meant for food production is reducing significantly. And therefore, in the new time, in the new course, definitely we are going to face a big challenge. I think even the idea of even having agri-cities, these are new tech ideas that if you'd identify the areas that you really want to showcase that we can produce so much, we can do a lot of technology, we can protect at any given cost. These are things that are already coming up, but I think we really must work with our policymakers and communities and everyone else to ensure that we make most of the very little land that is already left, including even trying to rehabilitate some of the lands that have already been actually lost through degradation, and just ensuring that our ecosystem is protected at all costs. So these are things that we brought into conversation, and we are hoping that the national position paper that will be discussed later in New York, and even maybe in going to the future, would really speak so strongly around protecting the very little land that is already left at all cost. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Charles. And I think you speak about advocacy, you speak about policy, we speak about legislation. And I think I would direct the next question to the CC, Mr. Makanda. Then I'll still come back to you, Charles. And this question, I think, is building up on what Charles just was explaining before. And this question to you is then, being the chair of the County Agricultural Sector Steering Committee in Bungoma, how are the issues that we've just spoken about above, so declining land, subdivision and stuff like that, how is it being addressed at county level? What policy interventions are being done? And what can we leverage on just to build further support on the work that is going? Either taking your example as a county, Bungoma, or even the other counties of Kenya.
Thank you, David. I want to say that that is true. I think there's a lot of pressure on land currently. Initially, the problem was just around Nairobi. I think Kiambu, you talk about Kiambu, Kajiado, and those devolution. The problem is bigger because of a lot of money coming to the counties, and therefore there's a lot of pressure on land. And there's a lot of land subdivision happening now. I think the law required that before you change land from agriculture use to commercial use, I think there used to be some procedure where the government could easily, stop such a process, especially in areas where food production is going to be affected. I find that people are actually converting agriculture. I think the requirement is just that you need to put in the national newspaper for a few days, asking for if there's any objection to real estate. And that's a major problem. For production of food is actually decreasing, while the demand for food and therefore increasing population, therefore the demand for food is going up. So I think the main focus then for us in agriculture, especially in the counties, especially with government, is to then come up with the programs and initiatives that are going to increase, to help in terms of improving productivity, so that we shift away from focusing on production to then focusing on productivity, so that we increase the amount of food that's coming per unit area. And that has been done by several counties, including Bungoma. And one of the things that has been done is supporting farmers in terms of accessing what we call subsidized inputs, because you realize that one of the major constraints that we have in counties, especially in this country, is the inputs in terms of fertilizer and chemicals are extremely expensive. Accessing seed from Kenya Seed or other form of seed system is extremely expensive. So counties have come up with strategies to kind of subsidize that, so that we can be able to enable as many farmers as possible to be able to access inputs cheaply in a way that they can be able to produce their food, and that then food then finds itself to the shelf. To also explain the concept of CASCOM, so that we can be able to understand. Basically, county agriculture sector consultation mechanism is fashioned around the JASCOM at the national level. Every county, the 45 counties in this country, have CASCOM. And basically, CASCOM includes both public and private sector organizations and development partners working in that particular county, especially within the agriculture space. Therefore, in Bungoma, we have several programs implementing different agriculture programs, as well as government departments who have come together to form a CASCOM. And the main function or the main role of CASCOM basically is to provide a forum or a mechanism for coordination as well as so what's happening in Bungoma and all the other 47 counties is that we have a forum, formal forum that brings together agriculture stakeholders at the county level to be able to discuss and agree in terms of project implementation, in terms of understanding what needs to be done where, and even in terms of understanding the approaches that are being used by different development partners to be able to implement. So in terms of the counties, and especially as a response to the challenges of decreasing land sizes, we have, like I've mentioned, the issues of supporting farmers to be able to access cheaper inputs. That's number one. Number two, we have also increased what we call extension services by focusing on even mass communication or mass messaging, where we use ICT as a platform for us to be able to reach many more farmers, to provide farmer advisory services, using the mass media, the radio, to be able to educate farmers in terms of improved agriculture technologies, as well as how they can be able to manage their farms, including IPM, integrated pest management, because we realize that even as we continue battling the current production challenges, one of the biggest challenge to agriculture food production is controlling pests and diseases. And our intervention as counties is increasing availability of extension services to our farmers as one of the things. The other thing that we have been doing as counties, not just Bungoma, but all counties, we have also implemented several strategies around post-harvest management, especially on common food grains and cereals. And that basically include, we have managed to set up cereal stores. We have also managed to put up silos for food, for cereal preservation. We have also managed to enable our farmers to buy hermetic bags, which basically helps them to keep their grains for a longer period. But more significant, I think, for the last few years, we have also been focusing on supporting cottage level processing of different products, because we also realize that when you process some of these food products, you basically increase shelf life and you make it more available, as well as reducing chances for wastage and reducing chances of the food going bad. So investment in processing, value addition, packaging, as well as food preservation are some of the strategies and some of the interventions that have been done by the counties to be able to improve availability of food to our growing population. But I think another thing that I can quickly mention, especially to counties which are coming from counties which are we consider ASAL or low potential, like Kilifi, I think Makueni, Machakos, the rest, they've also had significant investment in irrigated farming, because we want to basically increase food production away from the pressures of land availability for land that's being subdivided for real estate. So counties have invested in irrigation equipment, where we think that by irrigating additional land, we can be able to produce additional food away from the pressures of land availability for subdivision into real estate. I think for me, again, in Bungoma, we have been lucky that we got support from GIZ, and we developed Bungoma County Land Policy, which is basically a framework or a legal framework that is helping us to, in terms of better management of soil and soil resources. And that was actually cascaded to the national level, because I think about 5 months ago, the CS for Agriculture, Honorable Munya, launched the National Soil Policy, which again is a very important document in terms of management of available land resources in a sustainable way to ensure continuous production of enough food for communities and for Kenyans. I think the last thing I'll talk about there again is that climate change, again, and related to land subdivision, climate change is an emerging problem, not just in the traditional climate change counties like Northern Kenya, Marsabit, Isiolo, and the rest. It's actually affecting even high potential areas like Trans Nzoia, Uasin Gishu, Bungoma, Kakamega. And that problem is coming together in these counties and coming up with approaches that we think are going to help us increase productivity of food, and making sure that food is available for our communities. And there are several programs, I think I'll talk about that in the next slide, but there are several programs that are already implementing in Bungoma, which focuses on food diversification, crop rotation, minimum tillage, and the rest, just basically to help us to be able to increase productivity of food as well as increase food availability to our communities. Thank you.
Sure. I think we'll still come back to the climate smart as agriculture as a way to dealing with climate change, as you've indicated. I think we'll still go back to Charles. I think GAIN has done quite a lot in terms of policy interventions in different countries. So I think it would be just interesting for all of us to hear really what are the policy interventions that GAIN is doing. What are the sort of investments that you've made in this field?
Yeah, thank you very much, David. Yeah, because we try as much as possible to really also engage around policy, because then that will really have a lot of long-term impact, including in informing resourcing. Some of the policy pieces that we've really been able to engage in, cutting across a number of aspects of our food systems. One of the things that I would mention is about food safety policy. I think we really all must appreciate that there is a whole shift in terms of populations moving back to, especially largely now moving to the cities or urban populations. In fact, it's projected to be 66% of population by 2030 will be living in urban setup. And you really must appreciate that a lot, for instance, even in Nairobi, a lot of the food that we consume comes outside Nairobi. And therefore, I think a lot more investments are required in terms of addressing issues in terms of traceability, looking at how safe the food we are consuming. Because when you look at the burden of the disease that comes in with what we consume, I think that means that we have to really work with our county government, including the national government, to put in place policy frameworks that will help in managing that. So we have been working with Kiambu County, Machakos, Nakuru, Mombasa, and Nairobi. About 3 or 4 of those counties are really at a very advanced stage. And I think also with the support from Agrifood and others, we've tried to really ensure that we consolidate our effort around coming up with the food safety policy for these counties, because then that would mean that they have put in place measures and also bringing together the various stakeholders that we consider ordinarily competent authorities or different departments who are working perhaps in cross purpose to really come together to really look at how they can be able to enhance surveillance around food safety issues, putting in place systems and structures in terms of laboratory analysis and surveillance for food in the cities. A lot of these counties like Kiambu, Nairobi, Nakuru are also industrialized. So you notice that something like aflatoxin in a lot of our maize that is being consumed and all this, even including wheat and all that, is I think the things that we really felt are very key. So we have really invested in that. And we've also gone further to also look into what we call food fortification and biofortification, because we understand the challenge of the micronutrient deficiency that is currently being faced, largely also related to the global warming, and therefore the quality of food that is currently being produced is really not very adequate in our nutrition. And also, of course, some of the losses in terms of nutrients that are being lost across the value chain. So we have really worked with these counties to put in place, especially the county of Mombasa, Nairobi, and Nakuru and Machakos, and Kiambu, to really look at food fortification as a way of addressing or enriching whatever food that is being consumed in these communities, to ensure that we really get the nutrients and the minerals, the vitamins that we need to get that in place. Of course, now the conversation around biofortification is also emerging, because we really feel that the best way to really address the malnutrition issues that is currently being experienced is to really produce some of the smart, what I would call climate smart crops, but at the same time are more nutritious. Like, for instance, currently we promote what we call the iron beans, which is very rich in iron, knowing very well that we are currently having, a very high levels of what we call iron deficiency, like anemia rates going at around 40% plus. So that means that there is a need to really put in place policies and work with various stakeholders to really address some of these challenges. Orange placed sweet potatoes has been into place for a while, and all these products that are currently coming into place must be taken up not only at production level, but at policy level. So we are trying to work with our various policy makers, our stakeholders and allies to ensure that at least some of these policies are in place. The recent one that we're also very keen on is about the open air markets, what we call the wet markets. It's an emerging area, very key, that a lot of the foods that we consume, and especially in urban setup, as I mentioned earlier, we buy them from the mama mboga next door. We buy it from the open markets there. But how much effort is going into really supporting our open markets to ensure that they are safe, they are more resilient, they are able to provide the necessary support systems to our vendors to be able to really sustain what we call supply chains that are able to ensure that there is a reduction, and prices of foods are not escalating, and therefore there's a diversity of food that is required. So these are the things that we are working with Machakos and Kiambu to put in place policies that will really look at how our markets are governed, managed, and setting it up to ensure that we have what we call a smart market idea. The same conversation is now already been taken up at national level, and I'm glad that the Ministry of Industry, Trade and Industrialization is also leading with this to ensure that markets are now more resilient to pandemics like COVID, but at the same time are able to really provide the necessary support that our mothers are required, including even setting up lactation room for breastfeeding mothers. Our mother should not be worried that her baby is at home and she's supposed to be grappling between selling our food and all this. So we would want mothers to continue doing what they're doing, getting what they require, and also the market associations to be empowered enough to be able to support, register their vendors to ensure they can access some of these facilities that would really enable them to be able to do what we do. And in that regard, we hope that the prices of food would go down and address some of those things. And finally, is the dashboards for our counties. We will not finish this without having a more functional dashboards, what we call the food systems dashboard at our counties, which would be able to give us routine data, a very real time, and inform the way we invest our monies, provide our extension services, getting to understand our pricing in terms of what is available and how this. So this is what we've also started in these two counties that we really feel at policy level, but also put in place a one-stop shop where we can get the requisite data that will inform investments in our agricultural practices and just address including nutrition issues that we're currently facing. So that is also something that GAIN is investing in a lot more, that we hope that will be copied across all our county governments, so that then we can also click in and just get the data and know how many farmers we have, what are they producing, what are the prices of the most commodities that we need, where do we get these farmers, how do we get hold of them with support and anywhere, so that the resources that are limited are wisely and prudently invested to make most and to ensure that the prices of food come down. So that's what we keep on thinking through and keep us awake every day. So those are part of the policy, the conversations we're having as GAIN, and we believe we'll be able to transform the way our food systems are working for Kenyans and even globally in where we work. Yeah. Thank you.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
It's like I'm hearing some of these things for the first time. The dashboard for counties, food system dashboards and things like that, smart markets and more resilient markets where mothers can actually breastfeed. I think this is really the way to go. But I just, two things. How is the sort of absorption of these interventions at county level? Is the uptake very, very encouraging for what you've seen? And secondly, for the dashboard that you've mentioned, I'm just wondering whether it is a resource that you can just paste on the chart, just for people to see how the dashboard looks like. And I think this is one of the things that most counties actually would like to have. But I think if we're able to see a dashboard, if you can just put it on the chart at some point, that would be good. Yeah.
Oh, great. I'll put something on the dashboard, especially the global dashboard that GAIN has set up, that we try now cascade to our country programs and see how you'll be able to navigate through, get a lot of data, compare different countries and how we are performing in various food systems. It's quite interesting. You love it. It's something that we really would want to encourage our governments to take up. In terms of uptake, I think one thing that GAIN invests a lot more is about research. Every time we get into a space, like now just recently before we started conversation about our open markets, we invested a lot in collecting basic information and data in terms of how resilient are our markets. Are we performing? What about the pricing in terms of the key and critical foods that we require, what are the volumes and all that kind of thing. And with that in mind, when you have cogent data and information that informs what you do, then we've had an opportunity to engage with the county leadership to ensure that at least they understand the situations. Surprisingly, you'll notice that a place like Kiambu, where ordinarily would expect maybe the price of milk to be down, or maybe eggs, sometimes, especially this pandemic period, you'll be shocked how much sometimes even the prices of what you ordinarily think are cheap doubled. And you would like ask yourself, surely is it something like omena, for instance, which for those of us from the lake region, 1 kilo at one point you could notice that is even more expensive than 1 kilo of beef. You know, those things that sometimes you would think are very basic, yet you're targeting the bottom of pyramid you think would be able to access the cheapest nutritious protein, and yet it's something that is way out of reach for most of our populations. So that is the kind of conversations we are having, and we are taking it as low as that let us not assume, but it inform our conversations and our policy discussions along research and in evidence that we have. So that is what we do, and I will be able to just paste a link on about the food systems that we kind of come up with, especially at the global level, that we're currently trying to cascade at the county levels, and see how we can really look through and navigate and see how it works. Yeah, thank you.
All right, great, Charles. I am just going further on the discussion that Bwana Waziri had started before. So he was starting to speak about the climate smart agriculture. And of course, this is an emerging pillar that is reducing resource use, building resilience, and also reducing carbon emissions. So I just wanted to understand, Bwana Waziri, how counties are championing climate smart agriculture at county level. So taking even the example of Bungoma as a county, how are you championing this?
Thank you, David. I think I want to take this opportunity to also thank the BDS conference planners. The fact that this year's theme is around climate change. Climate change is an emerging problem, as our regions, but it's actually cutting across the country, including the high potential counties like Bungoma. And it's not just about even lack of rainfall. It's actually even the duration and the amount of rain, and even the timing of rainfall, seasons which were never there in the first place. So I think I want to thank the I want to encourage them that we need to have to unchecked. I can tell you guys that climate change is, and therefore that's something that we need to really talk about, both the development partners, private sector, as well as the government. Having said that, I think one of the things that we have done, or what we are doing as a county in Bungoma, and I believe other counties, the first thing we did was to set up what you call a climate change focal office, basically a desk office to basically coordinate issues around climate change, and appointed a qualified officer, a qualified person to man that desk, basically to be able to be the focal person in terms of championing the conversation around climate change, as well as being kind of the database in terms of the information that's the second thing that we have done is what I can call the legal regulatory framework. As a county, Bungoma, and I think several other counties have already developed the climate change response strategy, as well as climate change policy, basically as legal instruments to be able to guide interventions and conversations around climate change, as well as just to support counties in terms of how they can be able to allocate resources and items of providing the much needed climate change interventions. So we have those two documents, the climate change strategy as well as the climate change policy as a county, and most of the counties have already done that. The third thing is that through those policies, we have also managed to set aside some resources, though minimal, but the resources are basically helping us in terms of coming first identifying risk areas identifying action is concerned, and coming up with the mitigation factors, mitigation measures to be able to and across the country. Then the next one, so far we have had climate smart agriculture program, which is funded by them. It's working in about 24 counties across the country, but also, of course, there is also, it's working 24 counties, yes, but there's also an opportunity for sharing with those counties which are not covered by the project. Bungoma is not one of those covered, but Kakamega is one of those covered. And we normally share ideas in terms of some of the approaches and some of the technologies that have been discussed and released to the market, ready for implementation. Apart from have development partners, I mentioned about GIZ. There are implementing programs in Bungoma that are focusing on climate change. But you also have MESP started a new program in Bungoma, which is called Green Agriculture Employment Program, or GIAP. GIAP basically is also focusing on greening, generation of employment in agriculture through greens, basically which are strategies and actions that are responsive to climate change and respect of climate change. And there are so many other programs. We have NARIC, we have ASDSP in Bungoma and others, which are basically focusing on interventions around climate change. So basically as counties, we have put in place both legal framework as well as capacity in terms of the staff. We have carried out a lot of capacity building of our staff for them to be able to understand issues around climate change, but also sensitization of farmers and other producer groups like fisher folks, also for them to be able to appreciate some of the risks associated with climate change and some of the mitigating factors that can be implemented by both the private sector, development partners, as well as the government. So having said that, I think I can quickly mention about some of the actual interventions and some of the strategies, some of the initiatives that we have done as counties as a response to climate change, as a response to threats posed by climate change. I think the first one around crop production has been use of renewable energy. Like, for example, we have promoted a lot of solar-powered irrigation system, where we use solar power to irrigate our farmlands for increased agricultural production, and especially in the horticulture sector. And that is happening across counties, whether you are talking about Makueni or Isiolo or Bungoma. You'll find a lot of solar-powered equipment, some of them funded by the governments, some of them funded by the private sector, some are funded by development partners. But the ultimate aim is to support production of food through irrigation using solar power. The other thing is we are also promoting zero or minimum tillage because we believe that you can be able to conserve far much more moisture in the soil by as much as possible avoiding disruption or interfering with the soil. So minimum tillage or zero tillage is one of the innovations we have been training our farmers. And I can tell you that that has seen significant improvement in terms of food production. I know there's a study that we did about 2 years ago in Bungoma that showed that by just adopting some of these simple technologies, including minimum tillage, farmers were actually able to increase their food production by about 40%. And therefore, they became more food secure, and they also earned more income from sale of the extra food that they are producing. We have issues around use of biotechnology in terms of just controlling the genetic makeup of some of the crops and some of the animals through manipulation of their genetics. And that basically is driven to the fact that we need to produce food crops that are generally more resistant to climate change, but also we need to also produce animals both for meat and dairy production, which are also kind of resilient to climate change risks and shocks. And therefore they can be able to withstand some of the shocks that are associated with that. So basically, I can say that climate change is a major threat, is a major problem. Counties have come up with strategies and programs to be able to respond to that. And I want to say that I can't say that we have done enough. We need to continue having this. And we want to appreciate the support from development partners who have been working with counties, especially supporting different programs that are really geared towards managing our climate responsiveness. Thank you. Thank you, David.
No, great. I think you've really managed to share on the climate smart interventions that you're doing as a county, but also indicating opportunities and also who is also investing. And I think that is great. And I think we have a rapporteur who is just taking notes of all that we are sharing, so that all the participants in the forum can actually get access to all the insights that we have shared today. And I think we let's keep the questions coming. I think we are almost at the tail end of this session. So let's have the questions coming, and the panelists should be able to answer them at the end. And keep introducing yourself or sharing if you have any information to share about your work and so on. You use that on the chat, and on the Q&A, let's continue having questions. There's some that are coming through already, as in based on what has been discussed. So I think I will move on. I think we just still have two more questions for the panelists. And the next question, I'm actually directing it to Jane of VAT. And so VAT is a Kenya-based export company that specializes in export of fresh produce, specifically to the European market. So the question to you, Jane, is how has VAT managed to reduce food loss and waste generation in its food supply chain? Is it time that we actually commercialized agricultural waste? What's your take on that?
Thank you, David. Yeah, for VAT and playing in the space of horticultural produce exports, both as fresh or processed, and having heard from the previous speakers that the land size is not expanding, then we are left with no choice but to jealously guard that which we have produced, or that which we put through our systems. Our approach, and I'm glad that what we are hearing, we are the direct beneficiaries of decisions that are taken in such forums as what we have today, because what we have are the results now being implemented, and we are part of the implementation of those processes. I'm glad to know where it all starts. So in the counties we operate in, and we operate in a number of counties because we follow, for example, the mango season as it moves from the coast all the way to the eastern region and up to the upper eastern region, is that we take the value chain approach. We're happy to work with the actors along the value chain and to interrogate what are those practices that pose a threat to food waste, or that expose or that pose a risk of food going to waste. And it starts right from the production. What are those practices that will make us produce more and of the good quality, and most importantly, of the safe products? What contributes to waste at that level, at the farm gate, if you like? It's if the product is not conforming to, say, safety standards, and the risk of the off-taker can see the risk of taking that product to the market, or even there is a great consciousness to the fact that whatever it is that we are putting to the food chains must be legal, must be safe, and must be of good quality, and must be affordable. So it's taking all those things into account. So what we try to do is work with the smallholder farmers to map our processes, and to make sure that the resultant product is a product that will find market, because there's the other issue of, is there a market or not of our produce when it's ready? And knowing that fresh produce does not give you time to think if you do not have a plan already. So we should, as we produce, we know This is how we'll take our produce to the market. We will follow this route. We will follow this growing map so that in the end we have a product that will find value. So there are different actors there who I have alluded to. We need the people, we need aggregation as a service. We need the producers themselves. Then we need to find a route to the market. Often, and there are things that we may forget. For example, when there is a situation of gluts in one part of the country, there could very well be a situation of a big deficit in another part of the country. So we begin to see also what are the other factors that are important to make sure that when food is produced, it can also be redistributed within the county itself or inter-counties to make sure that no food goes to the loss. In our processing, in delivery to the processing units, now I come close home to where VAT is. What are those methods that we use to transport the fresh produce, and I'm talking about fresh produce, from the growing regions to our factory? Are we taking it in such a way that we are guarding, and again, jealously guarding the quality of the food so that we are not then having taken it from the farmer who has painstakingly taken care of the product to make sure that it's fresh, safe, and of good quality, then Jane and her processes become the reason why the food will not find its way to the market because it's not handled properly. So checkpoint, how do we deliver the products to the markets? When we bring it to the factory, how do we handle the produce? What kind of feedback are we giving to the producing, the farmer who is producing depending on what we find out in the course of packaging the food, in the course of processing the food? Is there something that we can already prompt so that corrective measures are taken at the right places along the value chain? And then again, like what we had said before, through our processing units, are we taking care of, for example, we deal with a lot of beans are we accounting for every pod that we have transported from the farmer's farm through our processing line to finding its way to the market? Are we accounting for every calyx, the bits and pieces that we remove from that bin to make sure that it sort of finds some kind of value? Does it go to feed some livestock, or does it go back to become the green manure that we are talking about? I think it is taking a more responsible approach and a very conscious effort to know that our value may not in the short term come from, say, planting more or using more land, because it may not be there, but it's making sure that we maximize on what we have and we guard jealously that nothing that we have produced and taken care of goes to waste. Yeah, thank you.
Sorry, I'm mute, but great. I think you've shared really what VAT is doing. And I think I just have a follow-on question to Charles on the concept of smart markets that is being implemented by GAIN. How is it working, or yeah, how can it complement an activity such as the one VAT is doing?
Yeah, thank you very much, David. The smart market idea is something that it's very timely and very important because, as I've mentioned, GAIN, of course, we believe that we have to really ensure that our markets are a bit more resilient, and really they also reduce as much as possible in terms of the post-harvest losses. Part of the program, or what we think it should include, is also issues in terms of the cold systems, in terms of the cold storage or dry storage, which ordinarily we would really help and significantly reduce a lot of losses that are being incurred by vendors, because when you get to, especially the fresh produce that gets to the market, a lot of the times you realize that a lot of margins are being lost, and really a lot of, that really even shoots up the cost of food eventually, or even the quality of food that eventually is being bought and consumed does not really provide the nutrients and the necessary nutrition that we require. And therefore, with our smart market idea, again, we got into a level where we did what you call audits for these particular markets, and that really we had engineers really looking through in terms of what is the current situation of our markets. Are they really able to really ensure that even in terms of moisture, the food safety issues that we really sometimes experience in our open markets are something that is really addressed. So we have really been able to really work with especially the Ministry of Trade, because at the county level, we work very closely with the Trade Department, of course, the Agriculture and also Health, to really ensure that our markets are really well organized in terms of the stalls. You can even think of installing cold storage, of course, using clean energy, because we also say that with now the solarization idea, let's try as much as possible to go green, because there's a lot of sun, especially a lot of our markets. We can easily make good use of the roofs or the shades that are installed to really also tap as much energy as possible, and we can even light up the whole market and really extend even the operation hours to even maybe sometime in the night. Just see how that can really work out things. But as one thing that I'm keen on is about the cold storage system, because a lot of produce that are being lost and also driving the cost of food to be very high is because of the losses that come in post-harvest, or rather maybe during the selling of our food in the market. And that is what the idea that GAIN is having, so that we really work with our market associations, the county government, and also the other stakeholders and rather civil societies or rather development partners to really invest into a common cause and setting up a market that is very also sensitive to the gender dynamics, because you understand that a lot of even people who sell in these open markets are mothers or women, and that means that really there are also some challenges that they might really need to be addressed, including even the lactation rooms that I mentioned. But beyond that, we have to really be aware that some of the challenges they face are not as those that are being faced by our male counterparts, who largely also drive the SMA and very organized and bankable part of our food systems. So that is the kind of thinking we are having. And I think with the kind of effort that VATA are doing, we really would be very much happy to step into that, work with them to ensure that we reduce as much loss as possible post-harvest, and ensure that margins are still also there for our vendors who are really putting a lot of effort to get food to our tables, including a bit more of trainings and sensitizations. So working like GAIN, I've also been collaborating to come up with a curriculum on food safety, just to really ensure that the food are being handled very well. With the COVID, as basic as that, if we can't greet each other, yet you go there, people are handling cabbages, trying to fill the weight, every kind of thing. You see the kind of things that happen in this market. It's as basic as that. And that's how transmission chain can be broken. So we try to really allow them to adopt some ideas that can be used, including technologies. So we can have weighing machines and get to ensure that there is no mishandling of food that can also transmit some of these diseases that we have. So all that put together would make our markets smart, and also including addressing people living with disability and everything that for every need for everyone else, so that they can be able to access what they need. So it's about safe, nutritious, and affordable food for all Kenyans. Yeah.
Great. And actually picking on that your last comment, food safe and nutritious food, we actually speak about food safety, and I think it links a lot with the traceability, and this brings in mind the question I'd like to ask Jane. What have been the benefits and commercial opportunities of incorporating a full traceability component that tracks the produce from seed to plate that VAT is implementing?
Yes, in our systems, we have incorporated a traceability system, and I underscore the word system because. And when we say traceability, it sounds like, again, it's a very big and complex thing that we need to put in place. So, but to break it down, it is being able to account for every practice that we do, right from when the food is in the form of a seed to the form that we have on a plate. That's why we say from seed to the plate, or farm to fork. It is being able to not only document but also demonstrate that we can account for the safety, the legality of the produce, of the food that we put in the markets out there. On the gain side, there's usually a market demand, and especially for those of us, and I think even in the case of Kenya now, we are dealing with informed consumers who want to know what is in what I am putting in my mouth. And we have learned this both from interest as well as the hard way. Meaning that we are dealing with public health issues that were not very significant in the past. So we know that there is a need to demonstrate or to take a very responsible approach in the what is it that we are putting in the market. For us, it begins with a sensitization, again, starting from the farmer. We need to be to inculcate throughout, again, the value chain, a culture of taking responsibility to the safety and the legality of the product. I am not talking about just safety, the quality, but it's also, are the practices that we are doing ethical, that we are applying in our production ethical? How are we interacting with the environment? We know that once we have answered all these bits, all these questions that we are posing along the value chain, then we are speaking to ultimately responsible and sustainable production of food. We will be able to come back in the market the next season, but with safe products, we'll be able to deliver it to the same consumers, because we have not done anything along the value chain that harms whoever our ultimate consumer of the products that we are putting in the market is. Neither have we harmed the person who is actually producing the food. So they will be again tomorrow there. And now I'm trying to simplify it as much as possible. The farmer who has produced will still be there tomorrow, because we have protected the same farmer, because food safety issue is a wide issue that looks at who are the people along the food delivery chains. Are we taking care of them? Are there any practices that puts them to some risk, health risk? And it's an assessment of the whole food chain. That can only be demonstrated if you have a robust traceability system. For the farmer, do I have a diary for my crop? Or do I have what you call the crop history record that says that I planted this seed, that I sourced from here, so that it would be even possible to trace back the seed itself to where it came from? Because all these are the points at which the food safety aspect could be compromised or enhanced. So we look, it's a documentation of every step of the way. And for us as VAT, and again I said we deal with the smallholder farmers, can we genuinely give feedback to an individual farmer? We know we do an aspect of aggregation. We have aggregation centers where farmers bring their from 1 ton, a farmer with the ability to produce 1 ton of, say, fresh produce. And I also have a farmer whose ability is at 2 kilos of produce. Am I able to make sure that there is no batch, there is clear batch segregation. By having clear batch segregation, it means that the idea of pooling our resources does not take from the person who makes the best efforts to produce safely and to produce good quality food, because when it's aggregated together just anyhow, it takes from the person who does well and rewards the person who is not doing the right thing. But making sure there is clear segregation, we are able to give credit where it's due. We are able to give feedback that goes to correct or improve our situation. And we cannot do that if we lump things together. We have to break down. We have to provide advice that is really targeted. What does that do in itself? It enhances our partnership relationship with the producer, because sustainability in that kind of partnership must be based on the aspect of trust. How do we build that trust? You build trust because I know I am getting what I have worked for. Then along the line, what is the gain for that? We are able to get into those markets that would otherwise lock us out if we have no way of accounting where we got the products that we are putting in the markets through to. And when you can say with the level of authority that this produce is absolutely safe and it's of good quality, then we are at peace with the products that we put in the market, and we give the comfort to our consumers in whatever part of the world they are in, both locally and internationally, that we are giving them safe products. So it is beyond a system for what do we do, can you, in the event of a recall. A recall, yes, it is good to be able to say this is, when we are recalling this product, this is where it was grown, and we are able to go to that point. But that is really not an end in itself, because we should be able to say with a level of confidence, wherever any pannet that has come from our own systems and it's in the supermarket in whichever corner of the globe, it is a safe product. Yeah. Thank you.
It's great. It's great. You know, as in this aspect of traceability and food safety is an ethical issue, it's a moral issue. We are all called upon, and you're linking all this also to the farmer and actually motivating them, really. And you tie the entire value chain. It's great, quite impressive. So, Peter, this is the last question to you, and then we go to the Q&A. So you're a market facilitator, or in a way an investor in the agri-circularity space, agri-food circularity space. What could you say are some funding opportunities that that actors, partners, farmers, entrepreneurs can tap into? What are some emerging funding opportunities that you see?
Thank you, David, for that question. With reflection on the topic around circular agribusiness or agri-food circularity, we're seeing a lot of movement in terms of funding opportunities. Recently, we interacted with a couple of entrepreneurs in Kenya and Ethiopia, and realized one of their most pressing problem is access to finance, affordable finance. And what came out strongly was in terms of commercial lending, there was not so much opportunity in that space regards to providing financing to circular initiatives, maybe because it's not something that is new, it's not known to them, and it's still something they're trying to investigate and kind of get grasp on in terms of what does it mean in terms of designing financing packages or products that are tailored to this kind of initiatives that entrepreneurs are coming up with, or SMEs are trying to innovate. But what we've seen also is in terms of from the donor side, there's a lot of interesting movement upwards in terms of availing resources for financing to circular initiatives. And a classic example here is the Africa Development Bank, They've received financing from the Finnish Ministry of Foreign Affairs to a tune of about close to 4 million. So it's a multi-donor trust fund that is supposed to be set up for Africa, targeting African countries. And it's a $4 million product or trust fund that will be deployed in this year. I envision to be something coming out in the 3rd or 4th quarter of 2021. And basically, they're targeting circular initiatives, and they would seek to work with the circular startups and also targeting business incubators and accelerators that are directly supporting SMEs. So I'd like to encourage some of the accelerators out there, the enterprise support organizations, to be on the lookout for the Africa Development Bank and that initiative that is about to come out and about to be launched. The other one is from the World Bank as an institution. We're also seeing a lot of interest around circularity and how they want to deploy financing also for SMEs. And in Kenya, for example, the World Bank has invested close to 4.9 million USD to the Kenya Climate Innovation Center based in Nairobi. And they're supporting companies with circular business models and looking at all the way from startup to mid-growth to mature companies. And also targeting specifically those that are interested or deploying climate smart technology or that kind of space. So we see a lot of interest from the World Bank as an opportunity. And for those who are in the know, could be able to approach the Kenya Climate Innovation Center. I know right now they're running rounds or cohorts where they provide BDS, they provide technical assistance with the financing element to it. And the financing is coming in a blend of both debt and grant. We're also seeing Rockefeller Foundation. They're setting up something around food systems. And this is also in Kenya, where they're looking at designing products that will target SMEs and also a very keen interest in food circularity. And also the IKEA Foundation that also has expressed quite a lot of interest in providing resources, both in the line of technical assistance and also financing in the form of grants to SMEs. Ticket sizes vary in terms of the lowest being maybe close to $25,000. But again, these opportunities that are out there that companies, SMEs, entrepreneurs can be able to tap into and see how they can unlock some of this financing. The other ones are also impact investors. We are trying to get an understanding into what products they are developing for investments. And we're seeing that, there's a lot of interest when it comes to providing debt and mezzanine. But in terms of structuring the right deal for circular businesses, circular initiatives, it's something that we're trying to explore more. And I think in Kenya, there are quite a number of impact investors who are really keen on working with entrepreneurs in this journey. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. Those are several opportunities that you have shared. And just for remembrance or even for the audience to take, if you can, in the meantime, as we are doing the Q&A, type them out on the chat, that will also be a good thing. I think they can look up to, or at least follow them up. So I think we are coming to the Q&A session. I know that we've received quite a number of questions, so I'll be sharing these questions to the panelists. There is the first question. Just let me check that out. There's a question from Vincent Alila, Mekalu, then Oscar. There's a question from Nelson, Stephen Omondi. The question is, acknowledging that food waste is highly valuable as an animal feed, an important concern is that it can transmit diseases if containing animal residues. For example, the recycling of swine as animal feed was banned in the EU in 2002 after the foot and mouth disease broke out in the UK. What are the panelists' take on this regard to policy regulations in Kenya? So I think on this first question, I'm actually directing it to Charles. So Charles, just take in your question, that question. I want to read out all the questions, share them to the panelists, and then we will just have a round of response to the questions. Then, Bwana CC, there is a question to you. My request is to the CCs to make soil testing to be available to all the farmers and make make it cheap to improve food productivity. This will assist farmers to plant the correct crop. So this is one request. Maybe you already spoke about it. Yes. And then the other third question is quite a lot has been shared on policy influencing and advocacy initiatives. How can we better influence practices, behavior, especially looking at producers who are at the bottom of the pyramid, but playing a critical role? So I think speaking about policy influencing producers at the production level, I think Jane, you're better placed to respond to this question. I think you're dealing with smallholder farmers. Yes? Yeah.
I think it touches on policy issue.
It touches on policy, and Charles can give a hand as well, but at least you can give an attempt from a practitioner's perspective, and then from a policy support organization like GAIN, I think Charles can add to it. And then the other question is, what are the drivers and incentives for adoption of circular agricultural practices and innovations by farmers, businesses, and government? I think, Peter, this comes squarely to you. So what are the key drivers, incentives for adoption of circular agricultural practices, innovation by farmers, businesses, and the government? But I think on that part of the government, I think also the CC, you can chime in to this question. And I think already as at county level, you already spoke about some incentives you're doing to the farmers. So I think the both of you can deal on this question. And then the other question is, how do we deal with the risk of downgrading of certain materials in the recycling process? Do we have already set protocols to mitigate this? How best to balance between reuse, reduce, and recycle in the process so as to achieve environmental and socioeconomic sustainability? Peter, this is a question that looks like you can give it a good response. Then we have another question, which is which I think goes to which would go to Charles. Is a question and somewhere you mentioned was a question around this is from Florence Gadango. So she says, thanks to all the panelists for the great insights on the agri-food circularity concept. I believe this is a concept that needs to be ingrained in the minds of all Kenyans, starting with the younger generation. What opportunities exist in working with academic institutions to advance this concept among school, college-going students? So I think this is a question to you, Peter. And then another question from Oscar Wamalwa. How do we have interventions? Do we have interventions from African countries to safeguard its populace from maximum residue levels in regard to food safety? The focus has been with all strictness focused on export products. The farmers really do not follow the pH on the chemical labels, as well as use poisonous chemicals, as long as it manages the pests and diseases, which gives a huge risk to the consumers. Jane, I think this is something I think already you're doing, and I think you can give an answer to this question. So really, how to reduce residue levels in crops and so on, and not only looking at the export market, but also at local consumption. And then the last one to you, Bwana Waziri, is what are the key drivers and incentives? No, this has been, I've asked this question, but I think Peter and yourself will respond to it. Yes. Then the one more question here is, traceability food systems, organic food, etc. have an additional cost implication to the farmers without corresponding premium for farmers or reduced production cost. Adoption to circular agriculture will remain low. I think, Jane, when you answer your question on adopting food safety and things like that, the question is saying this is coming with an extra cost, traceability components and so on. So what are the corresponding premiums to farmers so they can actually adopt? So I think from your practical experience working with farmers on traceability, you can also respond to that question. So I think we can have those questions responded to. I think we can, and then if there's still a round of questions, we can still pick. But I would think I would give Charles a chance, Waziri, Jane, and then we'll come to you, Peter, as in to respond to the questions that have been directed to you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so the question about transmission of animal diseases to human beings, something that actually it's very important to talk about. And we all must agree that as a country, I think in terms of our food safety discussions, our policy draft has been in Parliament, I think the longest. The food safety bill that actually ended up in discussion, I think that has been since they are almost 7 or 8 years or so. But as we speak right now, it is something that has already been revisited. And I think I'm happy that even the county government through the Council of Governors are also thinking along those lines to ensure that there are, institutions and policy that would be able to really address the issue of food, food safety once and for all. A classical example is a case where you've had where sometimes the condemned maize that is high in aflatoxin sometimes has been really given to animals, and eventually thinking that that would not really get into the food chain. And really that has been really an issue. And we are saying that whether it's given to animals, eventually at the end of the day, it will come back to human beings. And one of the things that we really encourage is that once the levels of disease, or rather aflatoxins or any contaminant, be it disease, has actually been established, then really that should not be really given to people to consume. And therefore, not even animals should be given what has already been in contempt, as long as their levels, and that has already been set up even in terms of the standards, the kind of the levels of aflatoxins, or rather the that can be processed, taken through maybe maize flour or wheat or whatever to be consumed by people, or rather even animals. The same thing to animal diseases. I think one of the things that we must appreciate is that we have the veterinary department that does a lot of work in terms of the animal inspections and all this. The only challenge that I know is that sometimes these departments would be working differently. And I think some of the effort that GAIN and maybe other like-minded departments are doing now is to create what we call food safety coordination committees at county levels, wherein we are bringing in the public health department, the veterinary department, the fishery guys, and everyone else who are really dealing with the issues in terms of compliance and looking at safety issues to really work together and be able to compare notes in terms of what really they're able to establish, and therefore agreeing as a committee that how do we really carry this process forward, so that at least there are no cases or gaps where people do not really know what is happening where, or some people are not doing their bit. And therefore we believe with a policy framework around this, especially with the food safety policy, which I mentioned earlier, we have really tried to ensure that there is a whole chapter that looks at how we can create what we call a coordination committee that brings in the different competent authorities by the government to ensure that at least they're able to really deliver optimally, in as much as they have their respective acts that look, for instance, now for the public health, they have the CAP 254, which is the Food, Drugs and Chemical Substance Act, the Public Health CAP 242, others in terms of even the veterinary, they will be able to use the different acts. But we're saying with all that even in place, we could already find a common ground where they can all be kind of covered within a framework that would always periodically bring them together to really review progress and just ensure that they kind of elevate and sustain their surveillance around this. So I think that is something that we really need to look into, and therefore I am very happy that is something that is coming up at this particular stage. The other thing that I wanted to mention about that is that we are also encouraging county government, or rather just as we have in national government, to establish what we call surveillance labs or food labs. Because for honestly, other than the manufactured products, you really believe that there's a lot of opportunities that we really need to ensure that we create to ensure that we don't take too long. When a sample leaves maybe a county or a given place and goes to a national laboratory, it takes maybe like a month, 2 months, 6 months before you are able to get any feedback in terms of how we're performing, generally in terms of food safety, including even compliance to fortifications, as these standards have already been agreed as a government, as a nation, that we really need to meet what is required. So county governments are yet to really set up some of these labs. where they can be able to kind of do a lot of surveillance, including what is coming in from other countries. You know very well, there's a lot of imports that even coming to this nation that sometimes we may not even know whether they're meeting the necessary standards that we require. And therefore, I'm trying to stretch that discussion to look at it that there's a bigger need to have structures in place, invest in terms of competent authorities that have been put in place, but empower them through a framework, a legal framework that would enable them really work together. So that is one thing I wanted to put together so that at least we'll be able to address some of the food safety issues that are coming up. The other thing in terms of behavior change, especially at the bottom of pyramid and the community level, I believe issues in terms of sensitization is very key. And I'm happy Jen has really talked about this a lot more, that let people demand what is safe, what is eco-friendly, what has already been sustainably produced, what you think meets the standards, and also in terms of planetary boundaries that have already been agreed upon, can that be something that we can be able to address? And in that case, even as we speak, I think there's been a very long time, the surveillance has been around what is going for export. And that is one of the questions that has already been raised. But I'm happy that for those of us who are largely living in horticulture, now there is a standard called KS 1758 that is now going to really be a big game changer for us as a country to ensure that even within the domestic market, we are able to really meet the basic standards in terms of the code that has really been set up. And KEBS has already been mandated to do that. So not only are we going to look at the exports, but I think various partners like ReTrack and others have already currently now been piloting this with the retailers within the domestic market to ensure that this code 1758 is really being met. Other institutions like SOCA and a lot of surveillance happening right now. That means that we are really making a lot of progress as a country to look at that very lower level and at domestic and local level, that their standards are being met as a country. So I would say that enforcement is key. To be very honest, I work a lot more with millers, sorry for that, because under our fortification program, and you'll realize that the big industrialized, in the industries are always very compliant, but the small and medium millers, or sometimes our small entities struggle a bit more to really just catch up in terms of standards. But if therefore there should be a lot of enforcement, a lot of surveillance, a lot of training and sensitization, and also just advocacy for an enabling environment for even that very low farmer, producer, or an industrialist to really be able to really also tap into the market without much of what I would call us versus them, but really have us an environment where we can all agree that it's necessary to produce safe food, more nutritious and affordable for Kenyans to address all these issues that we are facing. So that is in brief how I'm trying to summarize the whole conversation around some of those questions. Yeah.
Sure. Thanks, Charles. I think it's a quick insights that we are sharing today. We still have more time during the BDCG conference and this platform to engage and actually to respond to all the questions in depth. So let's try to keep our responses brief because of time. We'll move next to Jane and then Waziri. You can come in, and then Peter. So let's take almost two minutes each just to try to really summarize our responses. Jane, you're on mute, sorry.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I will not go over what Charles has already extensively dealt with in terms of what can be done to influence behavior change, and especially at the producer level. And I think he has talked about also addressed the issue of where are we applying the standards, or are we only trying to think matters food safety when it comes to food for export, and locking out, forgetting our own consumption, and that it's important that it's safe. I think he has address that as well, and the fact that they are domesticated standards, the KS 1758, to which we now must all comply, whether it's for domestic or for export. But I also would be quick to say, in the case of VAT, because that's the only place where I really have the full authority to speak on behalf of the organization, is that when we go out to interact with the farmers and when we provide them the extension services, we don't only focus on the products that we are interested in buying from the farmer, so that if the farmer is also growing vegetables for consumption or for the domestic market, our agronomist will not say, no, I don't deal with that. I can only tell you about your French beans. And we try to extend the services to that level. And again, I must say that the approach of making the food safety policies interpreted at the county level. For example, in the county of Machakos, we have been integrated as a processor and also an off-taker of the product of the fresh produce within Machakos County. We've been integrated in the county committee for food safety, where we are looking at the policies that have been set at the national level, but now adapting them to be specific to the county where we are operating. We find this as a very useful and valuable approach, because we cannot win it by just applying it to the farmers that we work with. It is a wider issue, and it can only be won when it's applied as a standard. There was one question that was specific to, in order to comply to all these standards, to all these, to adapt a good traceability system, to implement a food safety system, costs. Is there a compensation? Is there a premium that comes as a result of doing that? And the direct answer is no. It does add on to your cost of production, but it doesn't make you any different. What you're required to do is comply with food safety standards. What that does for you is that it guarantees you, or it gives you a measure of guarantee that you will be able to enter a market. Whereas perhaps if you have no way of demonstrating traceability and food safety systems, you would be locked out of a market. So in order for you, if market access is a premium or a bonus in itself, that's what we have to draw. But I don't think we'll be given more. No one even really, we will not have relaxed standards because we are coming from, say, low resource settings. We have to find a way of pulling ourselves together and finding a fit into the market, and that sort of becomes our reward. So yes.
All right, I think
there's
the truth
no
is out
direct
there.
premium.
Yeah, okay, great. I think as was a response, there's a question to you.
Or am I mute?
Yeah. Now I was saying that there's a question for Waziri.
David, I can't hear you.
You cannot hear me? Can anyone else hear me? They can hear me. Yeah. So Waziri, as you respond to your questions, there is a comment from Jane. So she says, I'm very happy with how Waziri has articulated climate change issues in the counties. However, very little resources have been channeled towards this docket to streamline this activity in the counties, both by partners and the government. How then do we streamline these activities in all the government departments? So that's Jane's question to you as you add, and just keeping the 2 minutes if you can.
Okay. David, thank you for the question. I think I'll start with with your latest question. I want to confirm that yes, it's true that counties have not been very robust in terms of allocation of resources to climate change issues. And I want to say that the starting point, David, is not just about, it's actually at the planning stage. And counties are normally driven by what we call CIDPs, that's County Integrated Development Plan, which is a 5-year development blueprint for every county. And my suggestion is that we need to start mainstreaming climate change in the CIDPs of the counties, because then it's from those CIDPs when we then derive annual development plan every year for us to be able to allocate resources So basically, the very broad-based CIDP level, and that's happening currently all the 2017, the 2018 to 2022. So from next year, we are developing another 5-year cycle of CIDPs in all the counties. And I want to appeal to my colleagues and even development partners who work with us like MESP, and I know they're covering other counties, should actually have a conversation with those counties to ensure that we mainstream climate change issues into the CIDPs and therefore enable that allocating resources. Currently in Bungoma, we have, like I said, we have a climate change desk. We have a climate change focal person, but I know that we don't have adequate resources to be able to do the kind of work that we want to do. So that's something I can agree with, but I think, as I've said, that's a solution in my view, that we need to start mainstreaming that into programs, into the planning instruments, and ensuring that they're given adequate resources. Your first question, David, was around the soil testing. I think there's a panelist who asked a question about why we are not providing soil testing opportunities to all the farmers. Yes, it is true. Bungoma County was able to acquire mobile soil test equipment. We have had these facilities for the last about now 7 years currently. And we bought them from Soil Cares from Nairobi, and I think they did a lot of capacity building and training of our farmers, and as well as our staff in terms of how they can be able to utilize the resources. The costing was done, and the understanding was that every farmer, every sample should be tested at a cost of about 800 shillings. Unfortunately, most of our smallholder farmers apparently cannot be able to afford that, and therefore the uptake of those services has been extremely low. I think at some point we had a meeting with my executives and we decided to reduce the amount from 800 to 500, but still we haven't seen a significant improvement in terms of farmers coming for those services. But David, I also want to say that a study was done in this region by Kenya Market Trust, specifically in Bungoma, I think Trans Nzoia, Western Gishu, Nandi, and a few counties, Kakamega and the rest. And I think this is the way in the entire, Western region. One of the shocking findings was that the soils in this region are chronically acidic, with a pH level of between 3 and 4, between 2.9, 3 to 4. That basically means that they're very acidic. And they're very acidic, yet farmers are continuously applying, this fertilizer we call DAP, which studies has also shown that it continuously increases the level of acidity in the soil. So what then needs to be done is to be able to disseminate some of these findings to the farmers for them to understand that having your soil tested will help you to get a recommendation in terms of which kind of fertilizer to apply, and therefore even sometimes whether you need to lime your soil, because you can also be able to use lime to be able to reduce the amount of acidity in your soil, and that will increase your production as well as productivity, and therefore leading to higher increased production of food. So I think we need to have this conversation, encourage more counties to be able to acquire soil testing equipment, maybe work with the development partners as well as different financiers who can be able to even develop some financing packages that can enable, just like we have these different programs, even like 1 Acre Fund that are giving inputs, they're giving fertilizer, they're giving seeds. We can have a package on soil testing as one of the requirements for you to be able to access some of those, and the recommendation made so that you apply your fertilizer in terms of the amount and the type, because we also have non-acidifying fertilizer that can be applied by the farmers. So the farmers can only apply fertilizer in the farms based on the scientific advice, based on the soil acidity, as well as perhaps the level of acidity in the soil. And that is good because, again, farmers who have managed to adopt a recommendation have actually seen a significant improvement in terms of food production from the same piece of land after carrying out soil testing. So I think it's something that we need to explore more. It is something that counties need to adopt, as well as make use of these resources because they're available. Unfortunately, David, we cannot be able to offer these services for free because we have costs associated with running of this soil testing laboratory. We have the staff to pay, we have the equipment to maintain mobile and all those services. So that's why we need to charge a small amount of money so that we can be able to sustain them. In terms of awareness, I think many farmers are aware that is it clear?
No, it's very clear. It's very clear. I think the point is
Okay. So I can go to the second, the last part, David. The last part.
And you have 30 seconds for that.
I know Peter is going to talk about this more robustly because he gave a very good introduction. In terms of what you said, key drivers as well as incentives for the agri-circular economy in agriculture. I want to say the first thing is around through the Agrify program, we have the food safety in Bungoma and the food safety bill, which is awaiting passage by the county assembly. And the one that is in place is going to help us in terms of enforcing some of the food safety issues that have been identified. The second part, in my view, as one of the drivers I can quickly talk about is explaining that we live in a resource-poor world, and people understanding, especially producers understanding that efficient utilization of these inputs and increasing productivity of their farms can significantly increase the amount of food that comes from the farms, and hence that will give them more money in terms of income on the market, but also enable them to be more food secure. And maybe lastly, I can just being careful about food waste, being careful that we don't discharge too much poisonous substances to the environment to be able to destabilize the ecology, the local ecology, as well as just making sure that we maximize in terms of utility and productivity, so that people can be able to earn more from the unit factors of production. Robert, I think I'll stop there. I know Peter is waiting to say more about that. Thank you.
Great. And Peter, unfortunately, you have 1.5 minutes for your response. Just be conscious of time. Yeah.
I'll try and be quick. So there's a question from Vincent around downgrading of certain materials for recycling processes. In response, what we're seeing is, for example, there are some companies that are already coming up with interesting innovations around how to use these materials. For example, in Kenya, we have what we have is InsectPro. InsectPro is one of the companies that is dealing in the black soldier fly larvae production, and they're using the larvae as an ingredient into animal feeds. And interesting, they're using organic waste as their growth medium to raise these larvae that are further processed and included into animal feed. So we're seeing movement into, whereas it's downgraded as a product that is not seen as valuable as organic waste from open markets and food markets, as well as household wastes. They are coming in with initiatives really to see how they can transform that waste into something valuable as a growth medium. Similarly, in South Africa, there's a company called Inseco that is also doing similar model around utilizing of these wastes towards high value. In Europe, I've come across a company called Peel Pioneer that is dealing with the orange peels, and orange peels are pretty much downgraded as a useless product, but they're coming in to make high value products like oil, orange oil. They're making pulp for animal feed. They're extracting dietary fibers. So you see, whereas it's downgraded as a product, as perceived downgraded, they're coming in with initiatives that really try to upgrade this product. In Kenya, classic example in the fish industry is Alisam Products Development and Design. They're based in Kisumu. They're basically trying to transform fish waste, especially fish skin, into leather. They're turning it into leather. And interestingly, also in that market, about 150,000 metric ton of fish skin or waste is being generated. So they're coming in to kind of valorize these waste streams into something of high value. The other question you asked was around the protocols. What I'm seeing is in the fish industry, and borrowing in from Alisam, for example, KEBS has come up with standards that are being set around fish leather and how it can be utilized to make bags, jackets, shoes. And we're looking also to see how else they can come into state standards and design protocols in terms of reuse of these products into high value. A classic example is Pinekazi, for example. They're utilizing the pineapple crowns, which are in partnership. They work in partnership with Del Monte. So they're utilizing the crowns to make shoes, extracting the fiber to make shoes. So you see there's a lot of entrepreneurial drive to see how they can be able to utilize waste streams that are pretty much downgraded in terms of value, but trying to upcycle this to create more value from them and avoid the misconception that some of these products are useless or should not be rewarded value. When it comes to balancing reuse, we're seeing, I want to just to try to touch base on this, is when I spoke about the Moorman's ladder, where the value from waste is taken around a continuum where we're trying to see the least waste, the least use of waste is dumping, and trying to avoid this because it's contributing towards carbon emissions. And we're trying to see how best you can utilize some of these wastes and losses into high value. For example, making briquettes to create energy, as a compost to make soil amendments into new human foods for consumption, but further up in terms of reuse, in terms of food banks and cold chain to prevent the spoilage for foods and further encouraging the use of foods for human consumption.
Great. Thank you, Peter. And at this point, really, I want to thank all the panelists, as in for a very engaging panel discussion and responding to all the questions that have been asked by our audience. I think I also want to thank the audience for being patient, following the discussion, also giving your comments, sharing, networking in the chat, and also waiting to hear the responses from the panelists on your specific questions. There's a moderator who has collected all the questions, all the discussions that we've shared. And so everyone, because everyone who is here actually registered as in to participate in this webinar. So I think the summary of all the discussions, all the in-depth questions that have been captured will actually be sent to you. And as I hand over to Margaret of MESP, I'll just want to urge you to, if you're following the conversation, and there's a link that has been shared, sort of a survey that is very brief. It just takes a few minutes, almost 2 minutes to fill it up. As we wrap up today's session, please take a few minutes to respond to that survey. So Margaret, I hand over to you as I really thank the panelists. It has been really a very informative session. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everyone. Our panelists, the moderator, we are grateful. We had a very huge participation, going to up to over 100 participants. At this point, I would like to hand this opportunity to our Vice Chair of the Business Donor Coordination Network, Clarisse Kionge. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Margaret, and thank you so much, David, for such a good moderation. I want to just take this opportunity, as Maggie has put it. My name is Clarisse Kionge. I'm the Vice Chair and also the Head of Programs at Self-Help Africa. I want to give a humble acknowledgement to all who created time to participate in the webinar. Very glad to see so many practitioners from development organizations, academias, private sector, and independent consultants. We acknowledge the participants from Uganda, Ethiopia, Malawi, and Australia. Thank you for joining us in this interesting dialogue. I want to give special acknowledgement to Jeff Njagi, who is a key founder of the BDCG. And Jeff, thank you for such a commitment. You never miss this, and really it's still in your heart. I don't forget Kenda Mwenja, who also was part of the founders of BDCG. I want to acknowledge the current CEO of MES, Rebecca Mukoyev. Thank you so much, Rebecca, for ensuring the BDCG vision remains ablaze, and we are very grateful. Special thanks to the panelists who availed themselves through short notice to share with us their experience and practice that has really resulted to a rich dialogue. Having said that, I just want to give us a snapshot of what is coming up in November. And I just want to give a summary that indeed the BDCG, which we have used today to just give a snapshot of what we discussed, it really exists for a purpose of maximizing the effectiveness and impact of activities in BDS market development and value chain intervention through active coordination and information sharing. The BDCG, with the guidance of MES, of course, under the leadership of Jeff Njagi, had quite a number of members, starting it with USAID, Kenya, ACDI, VOCA, Kenya Market Trust, Oxfam, UNDP, SNV, Deloitte, TechnoServe, Cardinal Emerging Markets, Aga Khan Foundation, IFDC, Land O'Lakes, Safer Kenya, HIVOS, GIZ, CIDA, East Africa Market Development Associates, and CARE International. And later on, of course, was joined by Self-Help Africa. We have Christian Aid, Farm Africa, E for Impact, Practical Action, RTI, GAIN, Equity Bank, and many more that we hope to join us soon. As the chair had acknowledged, our main purpose as BDCG is really build the capacity of practitioners to ensure conformity to globally accepted best practices, and generally just ensuring that we coordinate these development initiatives through knowledge and experience sharing. How do we finance the BDS? So the BDCG activities are financed first and foremost by the hosting organization, which has been MEST as the secretariat, taking care of the core course of these activities. And also the delivery of most of the activities is sustained by charging members at a cost when they participate in these conferences and in these activities. So we are planning to have a BDS conference, the 15th BDS conference in November. Our proposed date is November 22nd to 26th. We will be having it in Mombasa. And the Secretariat is currently assessing the suitability of the venue in line with the COVID-19 protocols, and will be sharing with us that in due course. We also plan to have it as a blended forum so that we can allow for virtual participation, and we'll also be able to communicate that to you later. The structure will be 3 days training and followed by a 2 days conference where we just share our lessons and get more of what we've had today. We have told you that the Secretariat will be sharing the details, including cost, the actual venue, and call for presentations on various topics. And some of the topics that we are thinking about is the circular economy in agriculture and other related sectors. We'll be able to share that in due course. Our appeal, therefore, is to invite more organizations to the membership of the BDCG. And you can be members by generally just reaching out to the Secretariat, which is MEST, and you'll be able to join the network. You can also be able to participate in the planning and structuring of the conference. And so we really invite you to be part of us. And also be committed to sponsoring your team members to the conference. As I've said, that is how we sustain the activities of this. So we'll really invite the members to really sponsor your own teams to the conference. We also want to invite members that you will take lead in topics of expertise and as per your organization's strategic interest. So take interest and please, when the time comes, share and be ready to present during the conference. Otherwise, feel free to reach out to the Secretariat. Maggie is currently coordinating this, and we encourage early booking also towards the participation to help the Secretariat in planning. And I really wish that we can be able to do this by September 30th, so that the Secretariat is able to book enough rooms and enough accommodation for all of us. Otherwise, we really want to thank all of you for participating, creating time within a short time, and we look forward to a richer interaction in the November BDS conference. Thank you so much. Enjoy your day and enjoy your week. Over to you, Maggie. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Vice Chair, and to all participants, panelists, as well as the moderator. We are particularly very grateful from the Secretariat here at MEST. We want to appreciate all of you for creating time and being part of this network. Thank you very much, and we'll be reaching out to you with more information from the deliberations of today, and of course, for the activities moving forward. Thank you, and bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Good day.